Chapter 3, Naruto vs. Paul. I would like to say thank you to all those whom reviewed. I read all of the reviews. If I did not respond to your review, that means that I am not sure about that certain thing or that I cannot reveal that information yet. I want to keep some things secret for now. I like all the follows and favorites that the story gets. But seriously guys, review. It is reviews and positive responses that give me the motivation to continue to write this story. Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto or Pokémon. They belong to their own respective owners. This is non-profit work that was simply made for fun. If I owned Naruto, the guy would know a lot more jutsu and have an awesome Kekkei Genkai like the Rinnegan. And if I owned Pokémon, Ash would be the best and actually win something other than just the Orange Islands and the Battle Frontier. Additional disclaimer. This fic will contain lemon and violence scenes. This is a warning given in advance. If you are not comfortable with that, then please leave or read at your own risk. Current location. At the Battle Pyramid. Naruto and Paul were currently standing on opposite ends of the battlefield that was located inside of the Battle Pyramid. Brandon's assistant, Samuel, was standing on a slightly raised platform that was beside the middle divider of the battlefield. Author note. Think of the place where all the referees usually stand. Samuel had agreed to be the referee for this battle at Brandon's behest. Samuel was a young man who appeared to be in his late teens. He had light brown hair and a pair of bright blue eyes. He was wearing a light brown uniform that looked to be suited for outdoor activities, as well as an ocean blue collared tie. Samuel also had a bandana around his hair in a fashion which reminded Naruto of one Ibiki Morino, the head of the torture and interrogation department of the village hidden in the leaves. Naruto silently pondered if it was possible that this guy was like Ibiki, but he quickly dismissed the thought. This was because Samuel seemed to lack the imposing figure and intimidating aura that Ibiki possessed. But then again, it was highly unlikely for someone to have the need for such traits in this world, unless of course they were a part of the police department. There were also several people who were seated in the stands. Amongst them were Ash, Dawn, Cynthia, Scott, Brandon and Brock. For Brandon, this was not something he was accustomed to, as he was normally the one who would take part in the battles that were held in the Battle Pyramid, not sit down and watch them. There was a first time for everything, right? Some of you out there must be wondering how all of these guys ended up here, right? Well, the answer to that question is as follows. After Paul arrogantly decided to challenge Naruto to a full battle, Scott had brought up the proposition of letting the battle be conducted in the Battle Pyramid by saying that it was a much better suited battleground. That or Scott probably wanted to save Paul from the humiliation that Scott knew Paul would have had to have endured otherwise. Scott already knew that had Naruto and Paul ended up conducting their battle in the open, there would have been a much larger group of spectators present to witness what Scott knew was sure to come. Paul's loss was inevitable in Scott's eyes. Scott was fairly confident that Naruto was going to end up picking apart Paul's team, probably without much effort to boot. And with that, the group of 8, Ash, Dawn, Brock, Paul, Scott, Brandon, Cynthia and Naruto made their way over to the Battle Pyramid on the battlefield. This will be a 6-on-6 Pokémon battle between Naruto Namikaze and Paul of Veilstone City. Trainers, send out your first Pokémon, said Samuel. Alright Espion, you're up, called out Naruto as he let out the physic evolution to engage in battle for the second time in the same day. Chimchar, stand by for battle, said Paul as he let out his Chimchar. Chimchar was a bipedal Pokémon that resembled a chimpanzee. Its fur was primarily a shade of orange, though its face, outer ears, underbelly, hands, and feet were light yellow. Its rear had a small, round, red patch that was obscured by flames produced by the burning gas in its stomach. Its ears were large in comparison to its head size and were red inside. It had 2 pointed teeth in its upper jaw. Chimchar had red markings that nearly surrounding all of its eyes, a swirl-like symbol on its chest, and 5 fingers on its hands with 3 toes on its feet. It had a swirly crest of hair on its head. If both trainers are ready, then you may begin, informed Samuel. Alright Paul, let's see what you have got. I can take anything you can throw at me, so you better not hold back or you will regret it, stated Naruto. Chimchar, fire, spin, go. Chimchar released a spiraling fire from its mouth that formed together into a vortex and fired it at Espion. Had the fire spin hit, Espion would have been trapped in a pillar of fire, but alas sadly it did not. Counter with Shadow Ball, said Naruto. Espion opened its mouth and created a black and purple ball in front of its mouth. Then Espion fired it at the incoming vortex of red flames. The shadow ball easily cut through and overpowered the fire spin before heading straight for Chimchar. Chimchar, use dig to dodge. Chimchar quickly dug a hole underground using both its hands before entering said hole in the nick of time as the shadow ball barely skimmed over its head a second or two later. Espion, get near the hole and use double team. Almost instantaneously Espion sprinted across the field, coming to a stop as it was just a foot's distance or so away from Chimchar's self-dug hole before it created multiple copies of itself. These copies of Espion surrounded the hole from all angles. As Chimchar slowly popped its head out of the hole that it was hiding in, a sense of fear and nervousness slowly started to seep into its mind as it saw the predicament it was now in. Not knowing what to do, Chimchar lunged at one of the Espions hoping to get lucky and hit the right one. Unfortunately, the Espion faded away indicating it was just a copy, and now Chimchar was wide open. Espion, Skull Bash, let's go. The real Espion, who was hidden amongst all of its copies, began running at the exposed Chimchar and its body became surrounded by a white aura. Espion then struck Chimchar with its head. This knocked Chimchar out cold. The floodgates had opened, and it was just the beginning. Chimchar is unable to battle. The winner is Espion, said Samuel. Paul returned Chimchar to its Pokeball, a disappointed look clearly visible on his face. He then delivered a few additional words to the fire-type starter from Sinnoh. You should be ashamed. Making one of the most basic mistakes like that. Worthless, spat Paul as he looked at the Pokeball that Chimchar was now resting in with disdain and disapproval clearly evident in his eyes. This guy still doesn't get it. It is going to be harder than I thought getting him to see the error in his ways, thought Naruto. Weavile, stand by for battle. So now you are going with a dark type, huh? No matter. Type advantage will make no difference against my Espion, said Naruto coolly. It does not matter how strong a psychic Pokemon is, they are still weak against dark types. Dark types are even immune to psychic attacks, retorted Paul. Naruto casually rolled his eyes at the remark, seeming not to care at all. Use Ice Shard, said Paul. Weavile raised its hands and formed a glowing light blue block of ice in between them. It then threw the block of ice at Espion. Espion, use quick attack to dodge. Espion ran at a fast speed and managed to avoid the incoming block of ice. While running, Espion left a white trail of energy behind it. Espion, use quick attack again to get up close. Again Espion took off, this time heading straight for Paul's Weavile. Rapid fire ice beam, ordered Paul. Weavile opened its mouth and a light blue ball appeared in front of it. It then fired a blue beam from the ball at Espion several times. Espion though managed to skillfully maneuver its way around all of the ice beams. Now use Signal Beam. A light blue ball of energy formed in front of Espion's head. It then fired a rainbow-colored beam from the ball at Weavile, hitting it dead on from point-blank range and defeating it as well. Weavile is unable to battle. Trainer, send out your next Pokemon, instructed Samuel in the stands. Boy, I don't think this is going to take very long, said Don. Don't count Paul out just yet. I am sure that he still has a trick or two up his sleeve, assured Ash. These two do not know it, but we have yet to see Naruto's going all out, thought Brandon. Like Scott, he knew who the victor would be before the battle had even started. He was broken out of his thoughts when he saw Paul letting out his third Pokemon. On the battlefield, Paul had opted to go with his Magmar for the third round. He knew that he had to try something. Anything at all to try and turn this battle around. Author note: I am not sure when exactly Paul caught his Magmar. I only know that the earliest that he was known to have used it in the anime was against Maylene. So let's just say he already has it at this point in time. Magmar was a bipedal Pokemon with a red body that had yellow flame designs on it. A row of red spikes ran down its back, and there were 2 lumps on its forehead with a flame on top of each one. It had a puckered, yellow beak and small eyes. Its thighs were yellow, and it had red feet with 2 clawed toes each. Its arms were covered in rigid, red scales, and it had red hands with 5 clawed fingers. It had black metal shackles on its neck and ankles. At the tip of its yellow tail was a flame. Paul knew that as things stood, this match was going downhill, and that he had to come up with a plan. Fast. Magmar, use Will-O-Wisp. A blue fireball appeared in between Magmar's hands and it fired it at Espion, which upon making contact, burned it, though Naruto did not seem bothered by this. Espion, use Facade. Espion became covered in an orange aura for a moment. It then charged at Magmar at top speed. Magmar, use Flamethrower. Magmar's eyes glowed orange. Then, it released a red-orange stream of fire from its mouth, charging Espion. Espion, to its credit, simply took the Flamethrower in stride as it charged through the flames, before smashing into Magmar and sending the semi-evolved Pokémon flying backwards. And Magmar was down. Magmar is unable to battle, said Samuel. Always remember to be careful when using a technique, or your opponent could end up using it against you, lectured Naruto as he repeated the words that Kakashi had told him during Team 7's bell test when he was a newly made genin. Alright Paul, who's next? Asked Naruto in a bored tone of voice as he placed a hand over his mouth, pretending to stifle a fake yawn. Paul stared at the Espion in front of him. This Pokémon may be quite strong. Okay, scratch that. Very strong. But now it was burned, and Paul knew he finally had something to work with. It was not much, but at least it was something. Ursaring. Stand by for battle, said Paul as he let out his 4th Pokémon. Ursaring was a bipedal, ursine Pokémon. Its broad body was covered in brown fur, except its muzzle, inner ears, and paw pads, which were a light tan. It had narrow eyes, a triangular, black nose, and wide mouth with small, visible fangs in the upper jaw. The fur on Ursaring's shoulders was longer and more structured, with rectangular extensions that resembled epaulettes. There was a large, tan, ring-shaped mark on its chest. Ursaring's forelimbs were long, ending in 5 claws each, while its hind legs were short and thick, ending in 3 claws each. Its tail was large and spherical in shape. Begin the battle, called out Samuel. Espion, I think it is time we get rid of that nasty burn, don't you? Asked Naruto. The purple feline Pokémon simply gave a curt but small nod. It already knew what move its trainer wanted it to execute next. Fine then. Use Rest, said the spiky blonde-haired trainer in the stands. Wait a minute. If he had a move like Rest, then why didn't Naruto use it earlier, asked Dawn. You see, although Rest is a move that heals the user's status problems and restores the user to full health, it also leaves the user vulnerable to attack while it is in a state of slumber, explained Brock. That is not all though. Naruto's Espion had a move like Facade which Naruto wanted to use to his advantage as much as possible. You see, the power of Facade is doubled if the user is paralyzed, poisoned or burned. So by waiting for a while, he was able to take out Paul's Magmar much easier, added Cynthia, who was really impressed by the way Naruto was able to think several steps ahead of his opponent time and time again. He had already done so several times today, but that still does not change the fact that Naruto's Espion will be easier to attack now, pointed out Ash. Oh, I highly doubt it. You see, Naruto would not do something like this without something to back up his Pokémon. He knows that by using Rest, an opponent could do the same thing he did to Cynthia earlier today, and use a one-hit KO move on him. So I am extremely sure that Naruto is up to something. He is almost always prepared for these type of scenarios, replied Scott. What are you planning, Naruto, thought Brandon on the battlefield. Ursaring. Use Slash. Ursaring claws glowed white and it ran at Espion as it attempted to slash the aforementioned Pokémon. Espion, it's time to use Sleep Talk. Espion's entire tail glowed white and it hit the Ursaring's claw with it. The force of the two attacks cancelled each other out. So Espion used Iron Tail, huh? I guess I will try my luck again by using Sleep Talk for a second time, then see what happens, thought Naruto. Sleep Talk one more time, ordered Naruto. The top part of Espion's head glowed blue and its head became surrounded by a see-through reflective shield. It then shot forward at Ursaring like a missile, before slamming its head into it. Ursaring, strike back with Hyper Beam, said Paul. The purple-haired trainer was given a not-so-pleasant surprise when instead of attacking, Ursaring backed away slightly, cowering in fear. What? Why is Ursaring scared? Asked Paul more to himself than anyone in general. This was caused by the move Espion just used when using Sleep Talk. That move was called Zen Headbutt. Not only is it a powerful move, Zen Headbutt also has a chance of causing the opponent of the user to flinch, thus preventing them from attacking, explained Naruto, causing Paul to grit his teeth in anger. I just can't seem to get a break here. What on earth am I supposed to do? Not only is this guy strong, he is also extremely lucky. Darn him, thought Paul. As fate would have it, it was at that moment that Espion woke up. Would you look at that? It seems that Espion is now wide awake. And it happened just as your Ursaring has decided to lose its nerve. What? Impeccable timing. Don't you agree, Paul? Now Espion, let's show them what a real Hyper Beam is like, boasted mock Naruto. Espion gathered energy before shooting out a yellow-orange beam from its mouth, defeating Paul's fourth Pokémon the very moment the move made contact. Surprisingly, Paul, instead of being angered or frustrated more than he already was, smirked at the development. After returning Ursaring, Paul let out his fifth Pokémon, Torterra. Stand by for battle. Torterra was a bulky quadruped Pokémon that resembled a tortoise, with a large shell covering its back. There was a single, oak-like tree and 3 triangular, stony extensions resembling mountain peaks on the top of the shell. There was a patch of brown, which resembled soil, next to the tree. A white rim surrounded the shell, and formed a diamond-shaped continuation on the front. Torterra's body appeared sectioned, with the upper half being green and the lower half being brown. Its mouth was jagged and at the end of its snout was a dark brown beak, giving it the appearance of a snapping turtle. Its lower jaw was green and there were 2 large spikes protruding from its cheeks. Torterra's small, red eyes were encircled by a black ring. Its legs were thick and they had 4 toes each, which appeared as if they were actually jagged stones. There were 3 toes on the front and 1 on the heel. As the large and bulky grass and ground-type Pokémon landed on the ground, it let out a loud battle cry signifying its intent to engage its opponent in combat. Okay, now is my chance. He just had his Espion use Hyper Beam, so the best course of action would be to strike while it can't move, schemed Paul in his head, though all of his plans went straight out the window with what Naruto did next. Espion return, said Naruto as the blonde returned the psychic-type evolution to its Pokeball in the stands. That was a good move by Naruto. A Pokémon will have to take a while to recharge after a Hyper Beam has been launched. Knowing this, Naruto decided to call back Espion for another Pokémon to avoid it taking any unnecessary damage, commented Cynthia on the battlefield. Idiot, 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 yelled Paul in his head, as he kept mentally berating himself for not remembering that Naruto could switch out his Pokémon as well. Paul felt like going and smashing his head against a wall right now, and he probably would have done it too if it was not for the fact that there were other people here right now. And it wouldn't look good for his image. Alright, now let's see what he sends out next, thought Paul as he, as well as all the people watching in the stands, eagerly awaited the identity of Naruto's next Pokémon. Lucario, it's your turn, called out Naruto. Lucario was a bipedal, canine-like Pokémon, with fur that was predominantly blue and black. It possessed a short, round spike on the back of each forepaw, in addition to a third on its chest. It had a long snout and a pair of ears. Besides that, it had 2 pairs of pointed teeth, one in the upper jaw and one in the lower. It possessed cream-colored fur on its torso, and blue fur on its thighs that resembled shorts. It had a medium-length tail of the same blue color as well. It stood on its toes rather than on its feet. It also had 4 small black appendages on its head. Paul, seeing as this has not been much of a battle thus far, I am going to let you have the next move, mocked Naruto as he made a come-at-me gesture with his right hand. Naruto in actuality was goading, baiting Paul. Is he insulting me? Does he think of me to be nothing more than a nuisance? Well, I will show him. No one does something like that and gets away with it, fumed Paul in his mind. Torterra, use Giga Drain on Lucario. The 3 mountains on Torterra's shell glowed green, and matching energy beams extended from their tips. The beams wrapped around Lucario's body, who made no attempt to dodge, draining its energy. before receding back into Torterra's shell after the attack was completed. Now use Frenzy Plant, ordered Paul. Torterra's body became outlined in green and it slammed its front 2 legs into the ground. Giant roots with spikes on them came out of the ground and headed straight for Lucario. Not yet, Lucario. Let the roots get just a little closer, said Naruto through the telepathic bond that the two shared. Just as the roots were about to hit Lucario dead on, Naruto called out his next order. Use extreme speed and get into the air, said the blonde-haired trainer. Lucario bent its legs and became surrounded in a white and clear aura, before jumping up into the air at a high speed. Now Lucario, it is time to use that move, said Naruto. Paul looked up towards the ceiling of the battle pyramid only to be met with the sight of Lucario, who was now looming dangerously above Torterra with a giant light blue-colored spiraling sphere of energy in its right paw. To make things even more impressive than they already were, the spiraling sphere was of gigantic proportions, even larger than that of Lucario's own body. The first thought that entered the minds of Paul and everyone watching the fight, minus Scott and Brandon, simply because the two of them had already seen the attack firsthand before, were, what the flying fuck is that thing? When the attack impacted with Torterra, there was a large shockwave unleashed. Once the dust from the shockwave subsided, the spectators were able to see the formation of a massive crater in the middle of the field, where Torterra was standing before being smashed with that last attack. Such ridiculous power. I don't think any of my Pokémon could have taken that blast head-on and not be knocked out. Not even my Torterra, thought Paul in resignation. His brain had been the first to reboot after witnessing the renowned 4th Hokage's jutsu being incorporated into a Pokémon battle move. Paul turned his gaze towards the newly formed crater, which looked to be at least a good meter or two, maybe even more in diameter, to see that the now bruised and battered continent Pokémon, which was laying unmoving in said crater, did indeed have swirls in its eyes, indicating that it was in no condition to continue battling. Paul let out a deep sigh of exasperation before returning Torterra to its Pokeball. I forfeit this match. There is no point in continuing this any further. I know that I have lost, admitted Paul, although he did it a tad bit begrudgingly. I guess that's it then. Nice, Lucario. Great battle, praised Naruto. The Aura Pokémon looked back at its trainer and thanked him for his praise, shortly before Naruto returned it to its Pokeball in the stands. The result was set in stone from the very beginning. Now the real question is, how will Paul react to this one-sided battle, thought Scott and Brandon. Cynthia, Dawn, Brock and Ash were still very curious about the final attack used by Naruto's Lucario, but decided to save their questions for later. Ash was currently looking back down onto the damaged battlefield with uncertainty in his eyes. On one hand, he felt that this was necessary for Paul to see that his ways were indeed wrong. Ash, like Naruto, hoped that Paul would now change his training methods and outlook on life. On the other hand though, Ash could not help but gain some new added respect for Paul. The trainer from Pallet Town knew that it would take some real guts to go and challenge someone like Naruto the way Paul did. In Ash's mind, Naruto was not someone to be taken lightly. In fact, that was understatement. Seeing Naruto's Dragonite bring down Cynthia's Garchomp had sparked a new sense of determination in him. It had shown Ash that anything was possible. The son of Delia Ketchum had resolved to make it to the top just like Naruto Namikaze. After finding out that the two of them shared similar beliefs, Ash's confidence in his chances of accomplishing his life-long dream of becoming a Pokémon master through hard work and bonds with his Pokémon had skyrocketed to unimaginable heights. So it was no big surprise when Ash rushed down onto the battlefield and offered some kind words to Paul in an attempt to cheer his rival up a little bit. I will tell you, Paul, that was great, chirped Ash as he placed a comforting hand on Paul's right shoulder, which Paul decided to ignore. Instead, Paul just spared a sideways glance at Ash before focusing his gaze on Naruto once more. The ex-shinobi was still standing on the other side of the field and had not moved yet, his face remaining impassive. As their gazes met, the son of Minato Namikaze decided to impart a little advice to Paul. We will battle again someday. Think back about what happened today. Train hard, and when you are ready, come and face me in battle once more, advised Naruto. I will work on it. Goodbye for now then, said Paul as he gave a respectful bow and walked off. Scene change. Pokémon Center Treatment Room. Shortly after Paul had walked out of the battle pyramid, he was followed by the others: Scott, Brandon, Ash, Dawn, Brock, Cynthia and Naruto. It was then that Ash had pointed out that Paul was walking in the direction opposite to where the Pokémon Center was located. Naruto and Cynthia had stopped Paul and reminded him that his injured Pokémon needed to be treated first, to which he accepted. Unfortunately, when they got to the Pokémon Center, Nurse Joy claimed that she needed to perform emergency surgery on an injured Pokémon. Thus, Naruto decided to heal Paul's Pokémon by himself. Cynthia offered her assistance to Naruto in treating Paul's Pokémon, as she also had an above-average knowledge in the medical field. Naruto gratefully accepted her help and thanked her for it. Nurse Joy then showed them to one of the empty treatment rooms before heading off to perform the emergency surgery. While treating Paul's Torterra, Naruto explained that when they are hit with powerful attacks, Pokémon tend to get a fever sometimes and thus Pokémon need to be treated everywhere. Cynthia also gave Chimchar a pill and some water and then asked it to rest. And this is where we rejoin the group of 8 in the treatment room. Scott and Brandon were standing near one of the 2 windows of the room while Paul was standing near the other window. Ash, Brock and Dawn were standing together at a corner of the room while watching Naruto and Cynthia finish up treating Paul's Pokémon. Alright, that just about does it. Paul, we are done treating your Pokémon, said Naruto while wiping off a bead of sweat from his forehead as he and Cynthia, whom were both standing in front of the trio consisting of Ash, Brock and Dawn, turned to face Paul. Thank you very much, both of you, replied Paul. Naruto, now that Paul's Pokémon are healed, there is something that I want to ask you. What was that last move that your Lucario used on Paul's Torterra? Asked Cynthia. The tension in the room suddenly spiked a little as the question was asked. Naruto inwardly face-palmed. He seemed to be making himself the center of attention far too often in the last 24 hours. Thinking about it again, Naruto thought that perhaps he should have just finished the battle with Paul's Torterra using a normal Pokémon move. As a certain heir to the Nara clan would say, all this attention was becoming troublesome. Naruto knew that he could not slip through this one without telling the others about his technique. He would have to come clean, again. But if the others were not going to let this slide, that did not mean that Naruto was going to just tell them all the secrets of the Rasengan. He might tell them how the technique worked, but he certainly would not tell them how to learn it, not for now at least. To answer that question, it would be better if I begin from the source of the technique. Tell me, do any of you know what aura is? Asked Naruto. Aura? Yeah, I remember now. I and Brock learned about aura when we visited Rota sometime last year, exclaimed Ash as a few old memories entered his mind. So the 2 of you already have a basic understanding of what aura is. Good. That makes things a little easier. But I think it is best that I explain this in detail anyway. In the Pokémon worlds past, there were once humans that could sense aura and control its power. These humans, known as Aura Guardians, traveled around the world doing good deeds and passing on their skills to those who were also in possession this innate ability. One famous Aura Guardian was Sir Aaron, who took a Lucario as his apprentice and became a hero when he sacrificed himself to stop a war from destroying the area around the Tree of Beginning. There is another story of how a Spiritomb was sealed away by an Aura Guardian who traveled with a Pikachu. Lucario is known as the Aura Pokémon and also possesses the most potential in that field, as it is the Pokémon that is the most attuned to aura. Medicham, on the other hand, is a Pokémon that has the capability to read aura. The Aura Guardians completely disappeared from history of time without a trace for some undisclosed reason a long time before the present era. There are very few humans who exist today that are able to utilize the usage of aura. I am one of those people. The only human in the present time known to have the ability to control aura aside from myself is Riley. I recently found out that a boy named Ash Ketchum possessed the same ability, though Ash had chosen to continue his journey as a Pokémon trainer rather than follow up on the revelation. However, I also found out from Riley that Ash did follow in the footsteps of the known Aura Guardians by helping Lucario to save the Tree of Beginning, explained Naruto. As the last few sentences left Naruto's mouth, all the occupants of the room seemed to continuously look back and forth between Naruto and Ash. The latter had the decency to look a little sheepish while the former simply shrugged it off unfazed that this new piece of information about himself was now out in the open. The way Naruto saw it, this new revelation actually worked out in his favor. He was really fortunate that chakra and aura were somewhat similar. It was one of the few reasons that enabled him to teach his Lucario how to use the Rasengan. The slight similarities between aura and chakra also gave Naruto a cover-up story, sort of anyway. This way, if a situation ever arose in which Naruto ever had to use the Rasengan to get himself or someone else out of trouble, he would have a way to reveal his unique abilities without revealing them completely at the same time. Whichever way you looked at it, it was a win-win situation for Naruto. Naruto cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. He did not want to spend too much time on this topic. It would be for the best if he got this over and done with as soon as possible. He did not want to take the risk of revealing anything unnecessary unless he absolutely had to. And the longer this discussion dragged on, there was a higher possibility of something like that happening. If you are finished staring, I feel it is best we get back to the matter at hand. As I was saying earlier, the Aura Guardians are nearly non-existent in today's day, but that just makes them more sought after. You see, Aura Guardians have certain abilities. These abilities may vary with each Aura user, but I can still name a few of said abilities. Some of the capabilities of past Aura users were that they were able to read minds and actions of another being. Besides that, they could sense other auras and view surroundings even with a blindfold on. They could also see through certain objects. Furthermore, they were able to project their own aura, such as to create barriers or attacks. Moreover, they were able to transfer aura to others, but that method could prove be fatal to the user. Another ability of the aura users was that they were able to use their aura to activate time flowers. There are various Pokémon moves which seem to use aura. Aura Sphere is a move that explicitly uses aura. Aura may also be involved in the moves Dragon Pulse, Dark Pulse, Heal Pulse, and Water Pulse, but this cannot be confirmed yet as there has been no solid evidence to back up this claim. Now moving on, as I said earlier, Lucario is the Pokémon that has the most potential in using aura. In a battle, a trainer has to use every advantage at his disposal if he/she truly desires to become the best. After my Lucario had reached a certain strength level, I decided that it was time to tap into all that hidden potential that Lucario had in the form of its aura. So I set out to create an original move of my own. I wanted to create a move that would be simple and powerful, but at the same I wanted it to be made in such a way so that others could not simply copy it for their own usage. Naruto paused for a moment before continuing. The move that my Lucario used on Paul's Torterra earlier was called the Rasengan. I created it by observing my Lucario's aura sphere, which I learned used a combination of aura and shape transformation to a lesser degree. I spent 3 whole years developing the Rasengan. My intention was to take the shape transformation of one's aura to the highest possible point. The Rasengan is a short-ranged, offensive technique. It relies solely on the aura control of the user. Once it is complete, it becomes self-sustaining, which does not give the Rasengan a definite limit for the number of times that it can be used in battle. The compacted nature and moving speed of the aura allows the Rasengan to grind into whatever it comes in contact with to inflict major damage. This tends to launch the target spiraling backward after being hit, or, if the target is lying on or being launched to the ground, the destructive force is enough to form a crater, as seen when it was used on Paul's Torterra. When I had my Lucario learn this technique, I had the learning process broken up into 3 separate parts. Furthermore, when the Rasengan was first completed, it was only the size of one's palm. But I realized that this would make it hard for Lucario to hit an opponent with the Rasengan in battle without the opponent dodging it or countering it with another move. So Lucario had to work even harder to increase the size of the technique. After about another month, Lucario managed to double the size of the Rasengan, which I called the Big Ball Rasengan. It took half a year more for Lucario to get the Rasengan as big as it is now. This newer version was named the Ultra Big Ball Rasengan. The Ultra Big Ball Rasengan is currently the most powerful version of the Rasengan in terms of both power and destructive force. It is mainly meant to be used on stronger opponents so as to take them or weaken them considerably. By breaking up the learning process into 3 stages and having Lucario make the Rasengan a lot larger, I have achieved one of my goals: preventing other Pokémon from using this move against me. Naruto had to stop his explanation about the Rasengan because a question was asked. Forgive me for interrupting, but what would happen if a person ordered their Pokémon to use a move such as Mirror Move against the Rasengan? Asked a curious Cynthia. Should other trainers order their Pokémon to use techniques such as Mirror Move to mimic the Rasengan? Then they are in for a rude awakening, as it will not succeed due to the way the Rasengan was built, said Naruto as he finished his extremely long explanation. Sure, the ex-Konoha Genin knew that he had changed certain parts of the Rasengan's background, but it was needed. Well, he couldn't just tell the others that his deceased father, who was from another universe, which was full of ninja, created the technique now. Could he? At least some of what he said was true. Naruto had to work really hard to make sure that he taught his Lucario his father's original technique using a method that was compatible with the Aura Pokémon. Naruto had to actually come up with a way which would allow Lucario gain a certain level of control in the manipulation of its aura before his loyal Pokémon could learn a somewhat similar version of the A-rank ninjutsu. Naruto noticed that the room had become really quiet. Too quiet for that matter. So Naruto took a look at the few people who were in the room. His eyes turned to Scott and Brandon, then to Ash, Don and Brock. After that his eyes wandered to Cynthia and Paul. Naruto noted that they were all currently strewn in their own respective thoughts. Some were in deeper contemplation than others. Though this was not to say that Naruto was not expecting something like this to occur. The people back in the Shinobi universe also sung praise about the Rasengan far and wide, and that was when it was used with chakra, which nearly every ninja was capable of utilizing. But in this world, Naruto had made his Lucario perform his father's original technique using aura. Also taking into account that the number of people who could use aura in the Pokémon world could be counted using the fingers in one hand. Naruto would be surprised if they could soak up all these new revelations like they did regular things. Naruto silently wondered if now would be a good time for him to act like a thief and quickly yet stealthily get away while the others were too distracted to notice. After a few short seconds, Naruto decided against it. There was no point. That and Naruto had a feeling deep in the pit of his stomach that if he got up and left now, then it would just lead to more trouble. And that was the last thing he wanted. After a short while Naruto could not take it any longer and burst out laughing as he fell to the floor and clutched both of his sides. This seemed to do the trick, as the others were now not thinking in their own world and were fully aware of their surroundings once more. "What's so funny?" asked Cynthia with a slight edge in her voice. Naruto couldn't tell if Cynthia was irked or if she was simply posing a question in a normal manner. Naruto put a hand over his mouth to prevent any remaining laughter that he had left from escaping his mouth. Before taking a few deep breaths to recompose himself, Naruto wiped away a stray tear that was threatening to fall from his left eye, probably due to his laughing fit. He then turned towards the champion of Sinnoh with a neutral expression on his face. "Nothing much. Simply put, I found it to be rather amusing to witness all of your reactions a moment or two ago," answered Naruto, his calm voice betraying how he felt inside. "Anyone would be in the same position if they learned what the rest of us just did a moment. How do you keep coming up with stuff like this?" retorted a stupefied Ash. "Can you keep a secret?" asked Naruto in a barely audible voice, which was just slightly above a whisper. Ash and the rest of the occupants in the room nodded before leaning in slightly to hear Naruto's reply. Naruto had an enormous shit-eating grin plastered on his face, or he would have if he did not use all of the willpower he had to keep it hidden from view. It would merely end up ruining what he was going to do next. Naruto really had to hand it to Sasuke's older brother, Itachi. The older Uchiha seemed to have a whole lot of self-control to be able to maintain that poker face everywhere he went. But Naruto could now see that there were many advantages to it. The poker face, as well. Once Naruto thought that there had been enough suspense, he decided to give the group their long-awaited answer. "It is good to know that you all can keep a secret because, so can I," said Naruto as in the same low tone of voice that he used earlier before bursting out into yet another set of giggles, which turned into full-blown laughter a short while later. Naruto made no attempt to suppress his enjoyment of the situation. There was no need to. He really was having the time of his life letting this side of himself loose. The prankster in him had not pulled a new prank in a while, but he guessed that this was good enough. The peeved faces that were half looking and half glaring at him would be testament to that. These facial expression triggered Naruto's memories on how the people of the village hidden in the leaves would look at him with bloody murder every single time he pulled a prank as a child. Be it the time when he pranked a simple food vendor or the time when he painted the Hokage monument in broad daylight wearing a bright orange jumpsuit. Naruto stopped his train of thought right there. All of that was in the past. Wallowing in self-pity over what could have been would prove to be pointless and an utter waste of time. He also did not want the others to know that he was feeling sad about something. And since when did Naruto Namikaze feel sorry for himself? He was stronger than that. Much stronger. While some of the occupants in the room were still a little bit agitated by the fact that they had been duped by Naruto, that thought was overshadowed by another which was revolving around the amount of intelligence and creativity that had been displayed by the former Hidden Leaf Genin. Just how strong is he? Naruto actually was the question on everyone's minds about 10 to 15 minutes later. After a short while, the hype on Naruto had died down. For now, much to the aforementioned person's relief. The topic of discussion then switched over to Paul's Pokémon. And that is where we are now with Naruto and Cynthia praising Paul about his Pokémon. Paul, your Pokémon are all very well trained, stated Naruto. And I am especially impressed with your Torterra. It's frankly quite amazing, added Cynthia. Torterra was my very first Pokémon, stated Paul. That is incredible, said Dawn. You raised it from a turtwig, asked Brock. That is right. We have traveled a lot. We made our way through the Hone, Johto and Kanto leagues but did not manage to win any of them. It was also during that time that I caught Weavile, answered Paul. What about Chimchar, asked Ash. I caught Chimchar after I came back to Sinnoh, answered Paul. You have done a lot with Chimchar in such a short time, praised Cynthia. So what? After all, Chimchar's performance against Naruto's Espion was atrocious if you remember, remarked Paul. Until you got hit with that hyper beam. I don't think you cared how many of your Pokémon took a fall, cut in Ash, who seemed to have had enough of the crap that Paul was dishing out about his Pokémon. What is your point? Asked Paul. Come on. How do you think your Pokémon felt about that? Don't you get it, Paul? Winning that way is only a win for you, said Ash angrily as he gestured towards all of Paul's fallen Pokémon, whom were all now asleep and recovering from their recent battle. Oh, give me a break. A win is a win, said Paul. You will never win this way, Paul, retorted Ash. Pathetic. You just keep doing things your way. I will get stronger any way I choose, replied Paul, who was not in the least moved or bothered even after the thrashing that was sent his way earlier in the day. You want to get stronger, do you? Asked Cynthia out of the blue as both Ash and Paul looked at her closely. If you do, then there is something that I want to show you, continued Cynthia as her lips quirked upwards a bit at Amity Square. Cynthia was currently standing in front of the same stone tablet which had pictures of Dialga and Palkia that she had inspected before her battle with Naruto. Naruto, Brandon, Scott, Ash, Paul, Brock and Dawn were gathered behind her. The words that are written on this tablet really changed my life. Listen while I read them. When every life meets another life, something will be born. When I was younger, I used to dream of nothing other than being victorious in battle. And so, I trained endlessly. Then I discovered that even the same types of Pokémon have unique personalities. At that very moment, I decided that I wanted to get to know each one of them better. After learning more and more of their ways, something completely new began to stir deep within my soul. I knew meeting new Pokémon was just like meeting new people. I am sure that because of our meeting today, something powerful has been placed inside each and every one of us. Something important. Something that will make us stronger in our own way. My desire to meet Pokémon has spawned a dream. That one day, I will actually meet the legendary Dialga and Palkia. Then, perhaps one day I will be able to travel back to the source and find the times and origin of all Pokémon. said Cynthia passionately as he gazed upwards towards the bright blue sky. Naruto silently admired Cynthia, who gave her silent speech, taking in the sight of beautiful form from afar. She really is one of a kind. I don't think I have met a woman like her before, thought Naruto to himself. I would be amazing to meet Dialga and Palkia, said Brock. It sure would, confirmed Dawn the next day. Thus, one of the most eventful days was concluded. Now we find Cynthia talking to Scott with Ash, Brandon, Dawn, Paul and Brock listening on intently in silence. Naruto just left a little earlier, Cynthia. He said that he had somewhere to be, so he wanted to get a move on and did not intend to waste any time, said Scott. Cynthia let out a frustrated sigh. Darn it, cursed Cynthia in her mind. There went that idea. After Naruto handed Cynthia the lustrous orb last night, though he did it discreetly and also placed the orb in an opaque black briefcase to avoid others knowing about it, Cynthia had been planning on asking him if he would like to accompany her when she left for Celestic Town the next day. She thought that it would be a good idea to introduce Naruto to her grandmother, Professor Carolina. Cynthia knew that the two of them, Naruto and her grandmother, would probably get along quite well. The two of them could even exchange some information and expand each other's knowledge on certain subjects. Not to mention that the journey there would give her more opportunities to figure out a little bit more about the enigma that was Naruto Namikaze. It seemed that her hopes had been dashed. Did Naruto perhaps say where he was going? Inquired Cynthia. No, he didn't. I'm sorry, replied Scott as he shook his head negatively. Before I forget, there are some words of advice that Naruto wishes to pass on to the rest of you, interrupted Brandon. As several sets of eyes turned his way, Brandon decided to continue and pass on his blonde-haired friend's message. A man does not have to live 100 years to be remembered for 100 years. Do something good in one day that will cause you to be remembered by the world for 100 years. This was a saying that Naruto asked me to tell you all to think about. He wishes you all luck with whichever path each one you choose. He also said that he looks forward to meeting every one of you again, said Brandon as he looked over at each one of their faces, able to see that they all currently had different thoughts on their mind. Scott and Brandon had departed shortly later and the others followed soon after. Ash, Dawn and Brock headed off to Hearthome City while Cynthia made her move to deliver the lustrous orb back to her grandmother in the Celestic Town Research Center. All the while the Sinnoh champion's mind was on the spiky blonde-haired man that she had met during the previous day. Though unaware at the time, Cynthia could not help but feel eager to meet him again. And she was not alone in this. Ash, Dawn, Brock and Paul could not wait for their next encounter with one of the last living Uzumaki clan members as well. But alas, most of the people Naruto met always ended up being interested with the unique personality that he had. End chapter. Well, that is the end of the third chapter. I would like to hear what you guys have to say and any ideas you guys have for future story. For those of you who thought that the battle was a little one-sided, well, don't tell me you did not see something like this coming. In future Naruto will also be using more jutsu to blend with his Pokemon's moves and training. Again, I would like to ask for ideas on how and Cynthia relationship should develop, as I am not very good at pacing how fast a character should fall for another character. Also, do you guys want to see Ash get paired up in this fic? If so, then with who? Send me your suggestions. Lastly, I was planning on putting the movies Rise of the Darkrai as well as Giratina and the Sky Warrior. I may even do the movie Arceus and the Jewel of Life. I need your help telling me of the time frame and canon when these movies take place. Thanks. That is all. I hope you enjoyed reading and I wish you all the best. Peace.